Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on the Hydropower Sustainability Standard Consultation. My name is João Costa, and I'm Head of Sustainability at the International Hydropower Association. I'm going to host this webinar today for the next hour. And with me, I'll have my colleagues Alan Kilajian and Amina Kadirjanova. They will support us, they'll present and also support us throughout this hour on the Q&A session and managing the chat box, etc. So it's a pleasure to be here and to speak to a wider audience about this standard, which is it's exciting times for us at the International Hydropower Association, for the Governance Council of the Hydropower Sustainability Tools, and also for the working group members. We'll have a chance to talk about all of that in this event. So let's get this started. Here's the agenda for today. We'll open the session with the remarks from the current chair of the Hydropower Sustainability Governance Committee, Roger Gill, and also the upcoming chair, Dr. Ashok Khosla, will be present for welcoming everyone into this webinar. Afterwards, I will present you the current framework, the existing assessment tools for sustainability in hydropower, and how and why these tools are going to be developed into a standard. Why is that important? What is the aim of that? And what is the added value of having a standard for all hydropower projects? After that, my colleague Alan will present you the consultation process, which is the key topic we're talking about today. What is the development process of a standard? What are the matters for consultation? What are we asking the public, asking you to provide feedback on? And also the timeline for that, from the beginning of the idea of developing a standard, forming the working group, and also passing through today, where we have this webinar and the consultation, until the development and ultimately the launch of the standard. We'll have enough time for a Q&A session. And on that regards, a bit of housekeeping. We'll have the questions on your right-hand side on the GoToWebinar control panel. You have questions there. You can raise your hand as well. And during that Q&A, we'll do our best to answer all your questions. Also, on the tab underneath the questions, you have a handout, and the handout is the consultation paper, so you can have access to it right now. It's also, of course, on our website, and we'll talk a lot about that today. So welcome, and let's get it going. We'll start with welcoming from Roger Gill. Roger is not, he's in Australia, so it's a bit too late for him right now. So we recorded an introduction from Roger, and I'll share with you right now.
Welcome to this webinar consultation on our Hydropower Sustainability Standard. My name is Roger Gill. I'm the outgoing chair of the Hydropower Sustainability Governance Council, and I'm very pleased you've joined this webinar. It's an opportunity for us to explain our proposals to you. The multi-stakeholder development of our Hydropower Sustainability Tools has been going on for many years now, and we're very pleased with the really deep level of collaboration that we've had in order to establish these tools. We've tested them, we've reviewed them, we've implemented them, and we're very pleased how they're going at the moment. And I'd like to in particular pay thanks to all those who've been involved, from governments, from civil societies, from banking institutions, from industry, and I want to thank in particular the great group of assessors that's helped bring these products into the market and have them so well implemented. Hydropower is going to play a significant role going forward as we move to a low carbon energy system. And what we want to make sure is that all future hydropower is able to be developed using good sustainability practice. And a standard is going to help set minimum expectations for the whole sector. Moving to a standard is going to give local, national and international stakeholders the confidence, the reassurance they need that a hydropower project is able to be verified as sustainable. This is a great step forward, and I really encourage you to participate deeply in this consultation and give us your feedback so that we can progress this standard during 2021. The Hydropower Sustainability Governance Council stands ready to be able to oversight the governance of this standard. And I want to bring you up to date with a change in the leadership of the Hydropower Sustainability Governance Council. We're very pleased to welcome Ashok Koshler as the new chair of the HSGC. He's got a lifetime of experience in sustainability with organisations such as UNEP, UNESCO, IUCN, and I'm sure that he's going to be able to lift the conversation around hydropower sustainability into the 21st century. These are important next steps. I hand it over now to the team to unfold the seminar and look forward to your feedback. Enjoy.
Okay, and thanks, Roger. I guess we are back on our presentation, and it's time to welcome Ashok, Dr. Ashok Koshler. It's a pleasure to start working with you now, and will be very good to hear from you. I think let me know, Ashok, if you have access, if you need to be unmuted. I think the team is checking if everything's okay.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely, Ashok. Yes.
Oh, okay. Because until now I was muted, and I was worried that I'm going to miss your thing altogether.
I'm happy. We can hear you very well.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad that all of you are there, and I just thought I would share a few very simple ideas that come to mind when we're looking at the kinds of issues that IHA and particularly the HSGC are going to have to deal with. The key issues for the future of hydropower are really the fact that on the one hand, much of the world, half the world, uses too much energy, and the other half needs access to a lot more. And it's not going to come from fossil fuels. It's not going to come from the conventional sources of energy that we've been used to for the last 200 years, simply because they're no longer legitimate. They're not good for climate. They're not good for the economics. They're costing more and more. And of course, you know, resources have a tendency, finite resources have a tendency to deplete over time. So wind and solar have great potential, but they also have limits. And it seems to me that hydropower is going to be always a major part of the solution mix. Post COVID-19, we've got to recognize that things have changed a lot. Our perceptions of the way the world is, the way the systems we deal with are no longer they're not any longer tenable. The crisis that we've just been through for the whole year provides essentially an opportunity for a reset, and I think that IHA is going to be playing a huge role in that reset. It's well positioned to find better outcomes for our energy needs and also for our water needs, and indeed for all the other big issues that it's going to have to deal with as it progresses. Background to all this, in my opinion, is that we've got to restructure our economies and our technology systems. We're going to have to recognize that an unfair society, an inequitable and highly disparate society, where social justice is not adequately in view, is not going to be tenable anymore. it's pretty clear that people are going to be demanding a lot more fairness in our politics, in our society, and in our dealings with each other. So all I can really say is that I'm delighted to be invited to be part of this team and of the larger IHA family. We're going to have to deal with our future in terms of value systems that are now coming into focus for all of us. The fact that energy and resources are the rights of everyone, especially of not only present generations, but future generations, and the rights of all creatures. We have responsibilities to make sure that the world is a better place now and in the future. We also have to deal, in the case of big projects like hydropower, big dams, with other issues like biodiversity, species extinction, resource depletion, erosion and despolation of soils, siltation, and even the oceans into which our rivers flow. So we have a lot to do, and this standards that we are talking about in this meeting and the whole exercise of setting codes for engineering practice, for evaluation, and so on, are really going to be fundamental. They're going to be really the way in which legitimate progress can be made. And we're going to need methodologies, manuals, capacity building exercises, training programs, and of course, the means to influence policy and investment. My own hope is that together with all of my colleagues on this in this joint venture, we will be able to persuade financial institutions, governments, and businesses that doing the right thing is in their interest. And I'm hoping that we will be able to do a good job on that over the coming years. And for the next 2 years, I have agreed to be a member of this team, and I would like very much to get all the support I can from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashok. A real pleasure to have you speaking today and to start working with you from now on in these exciting times. So let's move on and let's take advantage of the next 45 minutes we have for presenting this standard. Let's start with the context. The standard is not being developed from scratch. It's actually based on the existing Hydropower Sustainability Tools that already exist and were tested and proven for the last 10 years or so. And they've been used to understand and define what good and best practice are on sustainable hydropower projects, and also to assess projects in practical terms. So with the standard, we want to take a step forward, developing these tools into a certification tool that can allow for projects to be recognized and provide a label for sustainability. We'll talk about those details as well. So let's start with the current framework, the Hydropower Sustainability Tools. We have today 3 tools. One, the guidelines you see on the left-hand side is a document that defines good practice and expands on a number of sustainability topics that are common to hydropower projects, from biodiversity to resettlement to financial viability, hydrological resources, etc. So it covers social, environmental, technical, and economic aspects. And we have 2 assessment tools that are used to measure performance. So we have the HSAP, you see the acronym there, it stands for Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol, which was the original tool, let's say, developed a few years ago, launched in 2010. And this tool is the most comprehensive one. It covers all 26 sustainability topics, and it provides a framework to analyze projects and evaluate them against 2 levels of performance. one at basic good practice and one at proven best practice. So that's the protocol. And then we also have the ESG tool, or HESG, which you see there in the right-hand side. And that one is, we can say it's a lighter version of the protocol, while it maintains the same quality and the same standard of good practice. It covers only environmental, social, and governance topics, and it goes only to the level of good practice. So it's a more targeted tool than the protocol, and provides yet another alternative to assess a project. Now, these three tools are aligned, and they are both complementary, and they are not in competition with each other. So it is really a unified set of tools that provide this common language around sustainable hydropower, both for financiers, hydropower developers, civil society. And this is a big aim of these tools, and this is what they do. Now, a bit on the practical side on how they work, and this is important for the standard as well, because this is the structure that the standard will be built on. So it's the assessment process is an evidence-based process. It's very practical. It implies having an independent accredited assessor going to the site, doing a site inspection, interviewing the affected stakeholders, from the communities to developers to all actors involved, and also reviewing the documentation. So it's really a very well structured and very precise activity that provides enough evidence to take solid conclusions. And it can be applied to all stages of a project. So the tools were designed to be applicable from the early stage, where you're still developing the idea of a hydropower project, checking the options as well, and throughout the preparation, implementation, and operation of a hydropower project. And when we say implementation, we are referring to the construction. It's applicable to all projects, same methodology for any type of project, for any size of project, for any location. It provides really that common language, that unifying tool. And ultimately, it will allow projects to prove their performance across a range of topics. What you see there is a diagram of a protocol assessment, where each slice there represents one topic and the level they achieve. So it's really a very visual aspect, a very organized, all the complex issues of a hydropower project, and put them in a simple, easy to read way that can help decision makers understand what we have in the project, and make better decisions, make better choices, improve projects, and select better projects. Of course, the value that comes from this: increasing performance, understanding the issues and managing them, aligning with the financial mechanisms as well, because you meet ESG good practice, and this is very important. And of course, well, I haven't said that before, but the tools are aligned with the World Bank Performance, Environmental Social Framework, and IFC Performance Standard. So they are well aligned with the existing and recognized frameworks for evaluating ESG. It serves as a benchmark between projects because it provides the same type of structure, system, and result. So you can compare projects and you can see how your project performs against the best. These tools have been used to build capacity because the definitions are the definitions of good and best practice are very well described. So you can share that knowledge in projects and elsewhere. So it's an important tool to build capacity. And of course, it provides that, again, the common language that allows everyone to be sitting on the table and understanding what's going on in a project, which is very connected to the social license to operate. Okay, so that's the value of the tool. And now a very important thing, and one quite a unique aspect of these tools and very powerful: who developed the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol, which, as I mentioned, is the original tool. This was back in 2007, and for 3 years, the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Forum, which was composed not only by IHA, of course, but by a number of organizations, and you see some logos and flags even there, that gather around to discuss and define what is good and what is best practice and how to assess it. So you have social and environmental focused NGOs, you have financial institutions, you have governments from several countries that discussed and what are the issues and how can we solve them. And they eventually agreed on the majority of things. Well, every decision was made by consensus, and this was very important for the development of the tool and for the lifetime of the tool, because this in a way guarantees that everyone is involved, all perspectives were inputted into the tools, and this is really the only way to make these tools globally accepted and applicable. This is a very important process that is still maintained today, that ethos of multi-stakeholder input, of having several different perspectives on the table. And it's maintained today through the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Council and its governance committee, HSGC, which is the acting arm of that council and represents 7 chambers. I'm going to go through them because this is important also for the standard. We have financial institutions, we have hydropower suppliers and consultants, developed and developing country governments, social and environmental NGOs, and hydropower operators. So these organizations, these chambers, constitute the governance committee of the tools. They provide the oversight of the use and the quality of these hydropower sustainability tools. IHA here acts as the management entity or the secretariat. And still today, this council and this governance committee is responsible to guarantee that the tools are up to date and their application is up to a standard of quality and independence. And where are we today since the times of the forum until now? Well, the tools have been used around the world. What you see here is a little graphic image about the projects that were officially assessed, and I'll put an emphasis on this and I'll explain why. So you can see from small projects, and on one side of one extreme you have a 3 megawatt project, and you see the size of the circle corresponds an indication to the size or the capacity of a project, to the next end of the spectrum, which is a 14,000 megawatt dam. So as you see, and you can see there, a number of projects on all continents, on different economic landscapes in different countries across all continents. And you have run-of-river projects, we have reservoir projects, we even have pump storage projects have been officially assessed. Now, these tools are publicly available, they can be downloadable, so they also can be used unofficially. And in those terms, the tools have been used elsewhere and around the world to provide capacity building, and with an interesting impact in developing knowledge around sustainability as well. So the impact in a way is larger than what we see here. Nonetheless, we need to take a step forward, and that's why we're here now. And that's why we are developing a standard. Although, you know, the tools have been used, have been tested and proven they're useful, and their value is there, and the consistency of the results is there, and we can see it for around 10 years of experience. Now it's time to understand what we can do to make it even better and to increase this global uptake. And that's why we want to develop these tools into a standard, in a way to use these tools not only to add the value that I've mentioned before, but also to certify sustainable projects through an easy to understand labeling system that can be used as a corporate social responsibility and to show commitment to sustainability in general, while maintaining the quality and credibility of the existing tools. You know, all this background of multi-stakeholder ownership is important to maintain quality, and it's important to maintain this credibility that we have today, and we want to keep that ongoing. The standard, we don't want to make a threshold style, you are in or out of the group. It's also created, and this is a challenge, to encourage continuous improvement. So if a project doesn't achieve the basic levels, there should be a pathway to meet those levels. And if a project achieves those levels, there should be still a pathway to keep on improving. This is part of the idea. And ultimately, it will be a tool to communicate transparency and that commitment to sustainability that we emphasized. And the outcome and what we aim is to increase the global uptake of the tools, you know, for the sake of everything that Ashok said, of making this planet more sustainable and making sure that the resources we use and are well managed and responsibly managed, and hydropower plays a positive role into this transition to a better low carbon future. So this is the current framework, and this is why we are looking to develop a standard. What you see next is my colleague Alan. Hi Alan, the floor is yours now to explain and go through the process of the development of the standard and the consultation paper. So up to you, Alan.
Thank you, Joel. Yeah, so now that we thought it was, well, I'll introduce myself first. My name is Alan Kalajian. I'm the Senior Sustainability Specialist at IHA. Yeah, so now that Joel's, we thought it was a good idea for you to understand the kind of background and the tools that led to developing a standard. So that was a good little overview. And now what we're going to do is talk about both the process of how we developed this standard and what's currently under consultation. Well, I'll give you a brief overview of the working group. So the working group is the one who developed and drafted this consultation paper. And then I'll go kind of in depth on what's actually under consultation in this paper. So first, the working group on the global standard. So a little background. So as you see, our governance committee, the HSGC, gave us the mandate to go from these set of tools to a standard. The reason behind this was there was a push from industry and NGOs to kind of elevate the status of hydropower and be able to really kind of certify what sustainability in hydropower is, especially as we move forward in the kind of green energy, kind of clean climate agenda. So what we did was, as we do kind of with most of our work, is develop a working group that follows the same multi-stakeholder governance structure. So as you can see with the logos on this current slide, we have NGOs, both environmental and social. So from the environmental NGO side, we had World Wildlife Fund represented through Jen Hua Ming. From the social NGOs, we had Women for Water Partnership represented through Leisha Whitmer. Now we also had financial institutions. So regarding financial institutions, we had the World Bank, Ruth Tiffer Sotomayor. We had industry groups also represented both through IHA and through Hydro-Quebec, so a big developer and operator in Canada and Quebec, through Debbie Gray. And finally, governments. And we had a developing country government from Nepal, Sunil Pudel. So as you can see, it's always about having this kind of multi-stakeholder view, because the work, what we do is we want to have kind of consensus around all the stakeholders that are involved in hydropower for what we can kind of define as sustainable hydropower. You'll also see that there was a chair. The chair was Helen Locker. She's an accredited lead assessor of our tools, so someone who actually performs those assessments. But she was also the coordinator of the forum. So it's really important to have continuity between the initial consultation, would happen from 2007 to 2010, and the second consultation. So through her experience, we were able to have that kind of historical knowledge transfer from the initial consultation to the second one. So how it worked within the working group was every decision was made through consensus, and the outcome of that work was all kind of the paper that's going to be reviewed right now, and that's you're commenting on. That's really the kind of the crux of today's consultation. So a little bit of an overview, kind of like the who, what, why, and where. So in terms of the what, is kind of the developing a standard which we aim to systematically recognize and certify good practice in hydropower development and operation. that's really our ambition, right? Like we want to be able to recognize and certify good practice. So you want to have a label that says, you know, what's kind of sustainable and what is not over time. The who are basically any hydropower project type, size, location, agnostic, really any hydropower project can apply. And it's for both new and existing projects. Joao earlier presented that we have kind of a preparation stage, implementation stage, and operation stage. So you really see that this kind of standard will be able to certify a project throughout its entire life cycle. The why, so the need for the standard, it's greater assurance about sustainability performance. I think this is a really important one as we move forward again in this kind of meeting the targets of the Paris Agreement. You know, and if countries want to kind of fully have a grid that's completely renewable, you're going to have a base load that's going to complement the solar and wind intermittent energies, and hydropower provides that kind of flexibility to a grid. But hydropower has the question of, you know, okay, maybe it is renewable, but how sustainable is it? So we're going to have something in the long run that really can certify and recognize what sustainability means in hydropower. I think the social license to operate, we understand, and Joao mentioned this, so I don't feel the need to go into that more, but the international benchmark is very important because we've been noticing that, you know, countries have different regulations when it comes to hydropower development. So it's quite hard to kind of compare, well, a project in North America to one in Sub-Saharan Africa or one in Europe to kind of Southeast Asia. So through this, we can work together to have kind of general consensus on the global stage of what sustainability looks like and be able to compare projects from one to the other. And ideally, the outcomes would be increased recognition of the ESG impacts. You know, ESG is also quite linked to kind of green financing, climate bonds, et cetera. And a lot of these projects will kind of need this type of financing to be able to move forward. And we have to be able to match those ESG requirements from lenders, governments, or other forms of donors. And of course, the idea is we always want to kind of incentivize continuous improvement in hydropower development. You know, it's not just saying a hydropower project is sustainable or unsustainable. So like, if it is not meeting the requirements of the standard, how do we kind of improve those? How do we resolve gaps to kind of improve those processes over time? Okay, so under consultation right now is the consultation paper. This is actually, you'll have it in your handouts in this current webinar, but it's also available on our website. You know, people hopefully have read it before this webinar, but you have the opportunity to do so after. In the table of contents of this consultation paper, you will see the following main topics. So you got object of the standard and rating system, very important, certification process, all the way down to like what the communications will look like. I think it's important here to note that you won't see the technical components or the technical criteria in this table of contents. And I want to confirm to you all that the technical requirements, so you know what it means to engage with indigenous people, or you know what reservoir filling looks like, aren't under consultation at this stage. You know, these were in consultation in that initial kind of 3-year process in the form from 2007, 2010, and over the last 10 years have been updated. So recently in 2018, we updated the tools with kind of a requirement for free, prior, and informed consent when it comes to engagement consultation with indigenous people. So over time, these requirements have been updated to, you know, stay with the times, and went through a very rigorous 3-year consultation from 2007, 2010. Right now, we're not opening up those kind of technical requirements. What we're looking at is how to really go from these tools to a standard. So we're under consultation right now is really the framework of developing a standard. So we're looking at which tool we should be using, you know, what the certification process looks like, how long does the label stand for, you know, what's the appeals process, really the kind of framework, more procedural aspects of developing a standard. So what I'll do now is go kind of through each one of these one by one, not in too much depth because we want to leave some time for questions at the end, but kind of understanding what it is. You'll see that the first two, object of the standard rating system as well as certification process, are like we provide options, and then from those options we provide recommendations, and then options 3 to 9 are just recommendations, and you'll see that right now. So object of the standard and rating system has 5 options. You were told earlier by Joao that we have 2 assessment tools, which is the assessment protocol and the ESG gap analysis tool. these are the kind of what's being proposed as the object of the standard. You'll see that option 1, 4, and 5 use the HSAP, so the protocol, as the basis, while options 2 and 3 use the ESG gap analysis tool. Options 1 and 2 are a kind of a one threshold assessment process. So basically, either you're going to look at good practice on the HSAP or good practice on the HESG, see whether you meet those requirements, and then and if you do, you get the label, you're certified. The positive of this is quite a simple, easy to translate, no fuss around that. I'd say the disadvantages, it doesn't really incentivize continuous improvement. So how to go beyond just meeting the good practice requirements, do we incentivize that, or products are just going to be satisfied with just getting, just passing that initial threshold. Options 3 and 4 kind of overcome that disadvantage by offering continuous improvement, through in kind of a rating scheme for higher performances. And then option 5 also addresses that, but through kind of 2 thresholds where you're just looking at good practice and best practice. The consultation paper will list the advantages and disadvantages of each. I'm not going to spend all that time going through it right now. I gave you a hint of some of them. Another aspect is, the advantage of HSAP, that it covers a wider, more sustainability topics, but is also more expensive. So HESG focuses on ESG and is a kind of quicker and faster one. But those advantages and disadvantages are listed in the paper itself. So I'm just going to go next to what our recommendation is, or the recommendation of the working group is option 3. So we say that HESG at this kind of good practice plus incentivizing is the kind of most kind of valuable option for us moving forward. It's also aligned with the World Bank standards, so there's kind of international alignment when it comes to kind of working with donor governments and etc. Now, when it comes to the certification process, we have 2 options once again. One is the current framework, where you just, a project gets assessed, then you publish the results. You have this kind of open comment period where anyone can provide comments on the assessment report. The assessor has to address those, and then the project will apply for a rating based on whatever score they get. Option 2, which is a new kind of more novel based on a peer review of other certification processes, is you go through apply. So you apply for a rating first, then you assess, and then you publish, so following those things. And then eventually we, as the kind of secretariat for the governance committee, will recommend a rating based on the assessment score. So not too dissimilar. One is, we'll say our recommendation is 1 because it's something we're used to and we've done over years. Option 2 offers kind of maybe like a more rigorous checks and balances system, like it's there's more quality control in it. So it depends on that. That's the recommendation of the working group. So when it comes to sustainability in progress, so this is the idea of the projects that have not met the requirements will receive a sustainability in progress recognition. At first, this might come off as like some form of greenwashing. It's like, hey, if they haven't met the requirements, why are they getting some form of label? First, I want to highlight the word recognition. We have these internal discussions about greenwashing at IHA all the time. I come from the environmental background. I'm totally against any form of greenwashing. So we're actively kind of making sure that what we put out is both transparent and accountable. So recognition, so it's not a label. And to be able to get this recognition, you'll see in the consultation paper that projects will have to commit to having a gap analysis plan and kind of an action plan to resolve those gaps, which is signed by 2 executives. And then we'll only be able to get a full rating when all those gaps are resolved. So this is really just a transitory kind of recognition, but will not be given a sustainability rating or label to be able to kind of display on their website, etc. And these are recommendations. Once again, we won't be looking at multiple options. Then the duration, it's 5 years for any form of kind of assessment. So you get your certification, it will be tied to the date and we'll have 5 years after that. For older projects, so ones that have been kind of 10 years in operation since the commissioning of their first unit, it will be 10 years. This is of course related to the project stage. So if you move of an assessment, if a project gets assessed in preparation stage, after 5 years, it will probably pass the preparation stage and will have to be assessed again. So this will be a completely new assessment on either the construction phase or the operation stage. For major refurbishments, like a complete modernization of an asset, you'll probably have to do a new assessment once again. So if you're an operational asset and you're going to do a major refurbishment, you might have to do a construction stage, and this will be kind of reset of the time clock, so a new 5 years. In terms of rating renewal and update processes, this is for something for like minor updates, not a very light, we'll say, refurbishment. So it's not a kind of modernization of the plant. So it doesn't really impact the sustainability of the project, or something like a project wants to improve their rating. So they're, within the 5 years, but they want to improve their rating. So you won't have to conduct a whole new assessment. You do a lighter methodology where the assessment team will kind of do a reassessment and then submit a new score, and then be able to assess through a public comment period again. So follow the same form, but just a shorter, cheaper version of that. In line with ISIL requirements, so ISIL is the kind of it's International Environmental Social Labeling and Accreditation. So they're the kind of certification body for sustainability standards. They advise doing a review of the standard every 5 years, and this will be a moment where kind of stakeholders will be able to provide comments on the more technical aspects of the standard. So right now we're really looking at the framework, and maybe in 5 years we'll be like, oh, maybe we have to update kind of requirements on project sharing and benefit sharing, for example. An appeals process, it's important to know that during any assessment of the certification, you'll have a public comment period where people are allowed to say what they agree or usually disagree with what the assessment results are, and then an accredited assessor will be able to respond to those appeals or grievances. If that isn't enough and they don't agree with the response of the predecessor, then we go through a more formalized appeals process, and then the government's committee will be involved for the final decision making. All this will be available on the website as well to be able to kind of formalize and make the whole process transparent. In terms of governance structure, it will be the same governance structure as we currently have. So the governance committee, which is a multi-stakeholder body representing the different views and interests of the hydropower sector. And this is an elected group from the council, and the council is open to anyone who would like to apply. Finally, in terms of branding, the branding of the tools, it's been around for over 10 years now. We'll keep on, and we'll just have kind of slight updates. So this icon, which looks very much like the UN and SDGs, will keep on staying, just to leverage the kind of existing communication materials. Finally, just in terms of timeline, we launched this consultation in November. Now we're kind of the feedback process. The consultation closed in 8th of February. Then we'll obviously review all the feedback received. We'll also put this available on our a anonymized tabulated version of it on our website. Then we'll begin, if there are substantial comments received and there's a lot of there's disagreement with the recommendations, we'll potentially do a second consultation process. If not, we'll just go ahead with the standard design, and then we expect to launch the standard in Q3 this year with a kind of hard launch or like more formalized launch at the World Hydropower Congress in September 21. And just lastly, before the Q&A, I know we're a little bit over time, but we'll have a solid 10 minutes for the Q&A, is how to provide your comments. So the standard is available online through this link. We'll be sharing this presentation with all registered participants after the webinar. And what you do is go online, you can download the consultation paper, read it, take your time with it. And then there's an online response form when you press submit your comments, and it will walk you through each one of the same elements we saw today. So when it comes to object of the standard, you'll say, do you agree or disagree with the proposed recommendation? Same for each one of the recommendations. And then if you disagree, you can explain why. And then this will be how we'll kind of gather all the feedback. So you're invited to, submit all your comments. Your comments are really appreciated. This is how we make sure that everyone agrees and will kind of gives consent and kind of gives backing for this consultation. So it only work if the whole world supports it, because we all have the same, as Ashraf mentioned, the ambition of having like a sustainable future. These are the steps that lead us to that future. And that's it. Back to Joao. Or this is an opportunity, Joao. Maybe you can put your camera on as well now. Just to open up for Q&A. You'll notice
Thanks,
that,
Alan.
yeah, thanks, Joao, as well. Q&A wise, you won't be able to, you can raise your hands and we'll be able to unmute you if you have questions, or you can also put questions in directly in the questions box.
Good. I have already read one question from, I think, Catherine. Can a company apply the standard or tools to one project and not others? Is the certification made at the project level or company level? So the tools were designed as a project level tools, so they are designed to be used in one project. Having said that, there is room to apply them in a cascade system where several aspects are common to these cascading projects, and there's the flexibility to do that. So this is the starting point for the standard. It doesn't mean that in a review in the future, and that is definitely an ambition, to turn this into more of a certification level at a company level, who knows, at a region, as a country, regional level. I mean, there is ambition and there are good ways to and good reasons to pursue that. Of course, more challenging. Because when you look into one single project, it's easier to go to the specifics and be more certain that the local issues are addressed. When you widen the scope, then you might lose the depth of the analysis, of course. So this is where we are now, on the depth of the analysis and guaranteeing that we're covering all bases at a project level.
Yeah, nice one. So I see another one also in the questions. How can we sustain hydropower dams, reservoirs in Himalayan regions? Yeah, that's a good question. So I'd respond by saying that, you know, these tools are applicable. One of the benefits of these tools, and we talked about kind of international benchmarking, is that they're general enough to be applicable across many kind of country landscapes. So specific to the Himalayan, this has been used in that region before, in Nepal, for example. Yeah, and we'll continue to do so. So we can kind of work together. If you think of specific projects, how, you know, we can kind of work on building capacity in those areas. But yeah, those projects are eligible, and the tools will provide guidance to kind of make sure that those are being developed in a sustainable manner.
I have an interesting one and maybe Ruth is here. I don't want to put you on the spot. You might help me answer this one, about also from Catherine. How do we navigate through numerous frameworks available? So there's already the IFC standards that companies have to comply with, and also the IHA now. So I can start, Ruth, but please jump in if you want to provide any input on this. These tools are aligned with the IFC performance standards. Especially the ESG tool is really topic by topic organized, even in the same order with the IFC performance standards. And in that sense, and we've been working with the World Bank closely, and even IFC, around how these tools can complement the World Bank and other frameworks, and how they can be used to not be competition, but also actually help companies and help the bank as well. So what do you say, Ruth?
Thank you, Joao. Yes, confirm your explanation to the question. Really, any project that can apply the protocol and achieve best practice or good practices is well aligned with the World Bank standards and the safeguard policies, and the achievement of getting this standard will even be easier for projects for responding to the World Bank standards and safeguard policies, because it's aligned, as you indicated, but are even specific to hydropower. So that will make project preparation and construction and operation a lot more efficient and more sustainable. I'll stop here.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Ruth. Yeah, and so that kind of solidifies the alignment between the existing standards out there from the financial institutions and the standard being developed by IHA, which is yeah. So some other questions are If the HESG tool is used, could a company using HSAP for a particular project then translate the results from that into a standard certification? That's a good question. So basically saying, you know, if one tool becomes the standard, what happens to the assessments with another tool? Or even someone asked a question previously of what happens to projects that have already been assessed against these tools? Can they just get a standard label immediately? So we've thought about this within the working group, and one of the ideas was, you saw that there's a rating renewal process, so the one that has a lighter methodology. So projects that have been previously assessed will not necessarily go through a rigorous kind of assessment again. They'll just have to go through a lighter methodology to make sure that the criteria previously are aligned with the criteria being assessed now. For example, with the FPIC requirement, before 2018, it was non-existent. So if projects want to get a standard kind of label, they'll have to have a lighter methodology, potentially focusing on the FPIC requirement and see whether they meet that. In HESG tool and HSAP, they're quite aligned as well. So if one had done an HSAP assessment or HESG, they do a lighter methodology to just realign that with the standard requirements. So yeah, so there's definitely kind of options. And it's also important to know that the standard label will always be time dependent. So we'll have a specific time on it, so we'll know which version of the standard was applied. So in 2018, we'll say it's the, it'll have to be updated, and then this one will last 5 years, and then the next version will last another 5 years. Yeah, so there's always potential to do that through lighter methodologies. Okay, just going through some of the questions. Yeah, so one question is, does this process include checks to see how it is sustainability protocols are working in the 5-year certified time period? If I understand this question correctly, it's kind of how do you monitor the kind of the sustainability progress of a project over the 5-year period? You know, maybe they make a big change or something. So part of the assessment process and the certification will be kind of checking up with the project developer to make sure that there are no major changes that are happening to the asset. If there are major changes that influence kind of environmental flows, for example, or have really kind of sustainability consequences, then that will have to do a reassessment. So there'll always have to be a kind of liaison between the developer, the accredited assessor team, and the IHAS as the secretariat for the standard. Any idea of the cost to get a project labeled? We haven't actually, initially, to be completely transparent, initially in this consultation paper, we had included cost, but this, we're gonna have to do, I think, an extensive peer review of, other existing frameworks and standards out there and look at their different costing models, because there's one based on megawatt, there's one on the complexity of a project, there's one that do yearly payments. Yeah, so at this stage I don't want to say a specific financial model, because it's yet to be developed and will be developed after receiving feedback from this initial consultation period.
I'll jump into another one, which, well, we have actually 2 questions. Can the standard be used to evaluate funding by financial institutions? Yeah, well, if there's a connection and a link between this standard and any financial institution, that'll be good for the tool and for the Hydro developer as well. So, we've talked already about the alignment with the World Bank, and that's one thing. But of course, there are other mechanisms, especially or notably the green bonds market and the climate bonds labeling systems, where IHA has been working for a while now with the climate bonds initiative, and there might be a decision soon to have the ESG tool as a eligibility criteria for all hydro projects that want to get that green bond label. So this is all work in progress now, but it's definitely a good scenario for the tools and for the standard.
Yeah. So I see some of the comments or some of the questions are actually comments. Oh, have you considered mixing an option or regarding appeals? Maybe you can use a different pathway towards appeals, not accept all external appeals, but maybe you have to have a a filtering process of the appeals themselves. These are exactly the type of comments that we would benefit from being inputted in the response form. Right now, we're answering questions as best we can, but once you have actual comments, suggestions on maybe a procedural element we could improve or didn't think of, that's exactly the type of comments we'd appreciate putting in the online response form, which is available on our website. Joao, do you see any other questions that you'd like to respond?
Let me check. These are good comments, and I can see already your mind working there on how to put them into, translate them into the working group.
Yeah. Yeah, so one is, this is a tricky one, but will all IHA members be expected to certify at least one project? That's a really good question. I'd always want to make the distinction between this multi-stakeholder governance committee and IHA. IHAS is the sustainability division of IHA, and it actually is a kind of liability, is a different company itself, and its main purpose is to work as a secretariat of this Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Council. So this standard and these tools are really kind of they respond to and are governed by this multi-stakeholder thing, but there's a strong, obviously, relationship with IHA. So over time, IHA being the industry group, there'll be expectations to use the standard, but at this stage, no, there isn't a direct requirement to assess a project per IHA member, especially that a lot of IHA members are not also developers and operators, they're manufacturers, they're consultancy groups, so not everyone has an asset. So to implement that type of rule at this stage is not as straightforward, but the links between the standard and the governance committee in IHA are strong, and obviously IHA sits on the governance structure itself. Joao, I think there are 2 minutes left. Maybe we should kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, wrap it up. It's a good idea. I think we still have time for one more comment, and I think it might be worth talking about climate change and the climate aspects assessed in the ESG too, because we talked about biodiversity, ESG, and climate change is very important, and it's very well it's addressed very well in the ESG tool and the tools, and of course that will be translated into the standard, and they will cover the aspects of climate change mitigation and resilience. And it's important to make sure that the emissions from reservoirs are well understood, the emissions from a project are well understood, so they can be managed. And also the resilient part, how resilient is a project for climate change? It's linked to hydrological risk, it's linked to safety, infrastructure safety, with of course a social impact. And this is addressed in the tools, and the tools also refer to a climate resilience guide, which was developed by IHA and the World Bank and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So it's ESG with a big focus on climate change as well. I think it's important and interesting to clarify that. And since we're in topics, another about project benefits. Yes, there is a topic on project benefits, how projects develop programs to benefit the affected communities, affected stakeholders. There is even a how-to guide that was launched last year about how these tools promote and view the project benefits from a hydropower project. So you are welcome to check that to understand how these tools assess the project benefits. So yeah, I think we've covered. We ended up on the specifics, on the specific topics, which is good. It's a big part of this, but we're reaching the hour mark now, and I think respecting all the timings and also respecting we don't want to keep listening from us for much more time. So we'll be closing now. I think we have reviewed the big picture. We have viewed why the need for a standard, why we're looking for that, why we have that ambition, the importance of being a multi-stakeholder development built on consensus, the continuity to the specific tools that have been used and proven for a decade now, and the ambition for the future without compromising the depth and the quality and the consistency of what we have today. So that's it for the webinar. That was the outcome, that was the goal today, also to clarify some questions. And please do keep in touch with us, with our team, with the working group. We'll be looking forward to get all the feedback from today, read your comments again, and get the feedback from the feedback forms online. So it's time to close now. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure speaking today, and see you soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.